Hey, so you know how in the last video we talked about the status of different NHL players, we talked about trolling, we talked about the Canadiens and the Senators, it was a fun time. In this video, what I wanted to do was go over some other names, extra guys that have been making the rounds on a few interesting stats that I think may surprise you a little bit. We're talking about two of my favorite teams here, my first and third team, Vancouver and Detroit, because on the RNHL subreddit, there was a post made that I thought was very interesting from, when was this, 2 days ago? Yesterday? It was from 2 days ago, but the stats are pretty great. Now, of course, because this is a little bit outdated, some of the numbers in the list may not be entirely the same. If you go over to moneypuck.com, I believe it is, and check out the numbers today. But here's a post made on the RNHL sub by RangerFan0. The top 15 most efficient point scorers in the NHL at even strength. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, even strength production is pretty good in the NHL, and what this stat goes out there and does is it maps out how many even strength points players will get for every 60 minutes of time on ice that they spend. This is a pretty particular stat, and I think a lot of people are familiar with the format, so let's go out there and read who exactly tops the list of points per 60 in the NHL. It is Travis Boyd of the Arizona Coyotes, which is kind of nuts considering Travis Boyd isn't really the name that I think a lot of people would immediately jump to, but let's go out there and read a few other names. At second overall, you have Elias Pettersson of the Vancouver Canucks. That's a really good name right there. Followed up by Connor McDavid, Matthew Joseph, Farabee, Hyman Velarde, and Tyler Seguin. I wanted to take this time to talk about Petey, but before we do that, let's go out there and read some of the other names that are included on this list. At 9th overall, with 2.8 points per 60 minutes, you have Patrick Kane of the Detroit Red Wings. Now, he's not on the team right now. He didn't join them for the road trip, which I don't think anybody's too surprised to hear about. We're still just waiting for an assessment as to when he's going to come back. But Kane in his limited time has been good, followed up by Mason Marchment of the Dallas Stars, Nikolai Ehlers of the Winnipeg Jets. JT Miller is on here at 12th overall with a very particular skill set that I think is super interesting to highlight, followed up by Jeff Skinner and Nathan MacKinnon. Now, the 15th overall spot may surprise you too. It's another Detroit Red Wing. Daniil Sprong is the 15th best player in the NHL for points per 60 minutes at even strength. Now, of course, I wanted to use this stat, this list, as an opportunity to talk about each of these four guys, starting out with the most surprising one of all, Daniil Sprong. This is a good opportunity to talk about a guy that we don't normally talk about much, and for Sprong, I mean, this has been a pretty good season, all things considered. He's at 28 points in 43 games played, on pace for about 53, which would be a career high. He's on pace to matching his career high in goals. And even though he has been playing in a fairly limited role with the Red Wings, you could debate that because Patrick Kane is out, there might be a chance for him to move up. Maybe it's Fabry that ends up moving up in the lineup instead. But for Sprong, he's been a very underrated kind of goal scorer in the bottom of that lineup. And you could see it when he plays too. The guy's shot is an absolute cannon. He can fire it from wherever it is on the ice. Add to this the work ethic, how he plays along the boards, and just the pace that he plays with. This is the kind of guy that if you have him on your line, it inspires you to kind of take that extra stride or make a little bit more of a play or force yourself deeper into the forecheck on the boards, etc., etc. Sprong has been a very good player. Now, of course, he is expiring at the end of this season. He is on a $2 million AAV deal, expiring as a UFA, and he's 26 years old. If he ends up getting this career year that we're talking about, there could be some value for him to be had on the free agent market. Maybe some other team sees him and they're like, yeah, that's a player that we want. Maybe the Seattle Kraken come knocking on his door and ask for his services again. He was there last year. He was a pretty good player. So for Daniil Sprong, this has definitely been a good season for him, and he's one of the best players in the NHL because of it, in terms of points per 60 minutes at 5-on-5. That's pretty good, if I do say so myself. Now, talking about the other guys on this list, let's go upwards from backwards to front. The 12th overall name is JT Miller, as we had talked about. And I think this is a really good thing for Vancouver Canucks fans to acknowledge that Miller has been fantastic this season. 60 points, 44 games played, on pace for 112, which would best his career high of 99 points that he had 2 seasons ago in his 3rd season as a Vancouver Canuck. I think at this point, it's really easy to underrate JT Miller. Because, sure, he's at the top of the Canucks in points, and he's one of the top guys in the NHL, etc., but because of his age, because he's 30, because there was this entire controversy about him last year, where he was displaying a bad attitude, and maybe you could say that the Canucks made a mistake in signing him to 2030, and he'll be super old by then, etc., if Miller continues playing like this till the end of the decade, which I don't think he's going to. Like, he'll probably fizzle out at some point, maybe 2028, 2029, 2030, excuse me. Like, Miller is probably not going to be a 100-point player for the entirety of this contract, but if he averages, let's say, 70 points per season from now until the end of this deal, there's no telling how far JT Miller can put himself up on the list of best Vancouver Canucks of all time. Like, I honestly think it's possible here. This could be one of the franchise's best players. Sure, Pettersson and Hughes are better and younger, you could debate. Say, hey, when Pettersson was Miller's age, he'll probably be a lot better, which is fair. Very, very fair. Henrik Sedin didn't have his 100-point season until he was like 29, 30, so there's a lot of time here. But for JT, this has been such an amazing season, and one of the things that I thought was also interesting was the fact that his point production is mostly assists. If you look at this list of points per 60 minutes all time in the NHL this year, JT Miller has the second lowest goals per 60 at .82. The only guy with fewer goals per 60 minutes is Travis Boyd, of all people, the guy who's number 1. But for assists, Miller is one of the top guys. He doesn't get too many shots comparative to most of these other names. Miller has just been a really good passer, which is not surprising. He is a good player in that respect, and his teammates are finding the net, which is why he's on this list as one of the top points per 60 players in the entire National Hockey League. Now, the 9th overall name, I wanted to jump back here, Patrick Kane, has just been fantastic, putting to doubt all of the concerns about his hip, all the concerns that people had about him taking some extra time to train. He's at 16 points in 19 games played. I don't think that's a bad number at all. And you can see that a lot of the offense on that line just flows through Patrick Kane. He is just the guy. Going out there, making feeds, drawing players to him, debating them, and then making a pass backdoor. Like, Patrick Kane is still as dynamic as we have come to expect him to be. Maybe he's not going to get 100 points. Maybe he's not going to be a consistent point-per-game player the entire time he is here. I mean, he's at 16 and 19. He's on pace for about 48 points in the remaining 58 games. Of course, he's not going to play all of them because he didn't join the team on the road trip. But Patrick Kane, all things considered, has been everything Wings fans could have wanted and more. He's definitely helped out this team in terms of reclaiming one of those wildcard spots. They're in it right now. We'll see if they hold on to it without him. But Patrick Kane, one of the top players in the NHL in points per 60, that's not surprising. And then you have yourselves the 2nd overall guy, Elias Pettersson, who is out here. And honestly, when you talk about Miller being potentially one of the best players in the franchise's history, Pettersson is right there too, which isn't surprising. I mean, he had 100 points last year, but 58 points in 44 games this season. Pettersson is on pace to besting his career high, but the crazy part is, a lot of people would say he didn't really produce the best that he could have throughout this season. Like, Pettersson has come alive recently, the 4 straight game-winning goals on the road, which breaks an NHL record, tying the 2nd overall game-winning goal streak with Danny Alfredsson, just one behind Newsy Lalonde, that was broken on the Buffalo game when they didn't get Elias Pettersson to score the game winner there. But the Vancouver Canucks are in a spot where Pettersson, you could debatably say, has a lot more to show. He has an extra gear, which is crazy because he's still producing like heck, and there is so much to be happy with this player. But if he unlocks that gear that I think a lot of Canucks fans know is there, by the time he's 25, 26, like, honestly, we could be looking at one of these Datsyuk guys with maybe McKinnon-like work ethic that I feel just is so rare nowadays. but I don't want to pump my guys' tires a little bit too hard. Let's end this video here. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section about JT Miller, Elias Pettersson, Daniil Sprong, and Patrick Kane as to how well they've been doing this season. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.